Canada's economy began not with factories or tech startups, but with rivers and forests. In the 1600s, when Europeans first settled, survival meant one thing: trade. Beaver pelts, highly prized in Europe for hats, became the first global currency of the land. The Hudson's Bay Company, founded in 1670, was not just a fur business. It was a government, an empire, and the cornerstone of what would become Canada's economy. Indigenous nations were central to this system. They provided knowledge of the land, hunting skills, and networks of trade long before Europeans arrived. But what began as cooperation slowly shifted into dependence as colonial powers wrestled control of resources. The fur trade shaped Canada's identity, but also its inequalities. By the 19th century, demand shifted. Britain, hungry for ships and construction materials, turned to Canada's endless forests. Lumber camps spread across the Maritimes in Ontario. Rivers once used to transport furs now floated logs. This timber boom laid the foundations for towns, railroads, and migration. Yet it also revealed a pattern. Canada's economy was often shaped not by what Canadians wanted to sell, but by what others wanted to buy. A resource economy driven by global demand. If fur and timber built the foundation, railways connected the nation. The Canadian Pacific Railway in the late 1800s wasn't just about transport, it was about sovereignty. Linking the East to the West meant binding a vast territory together before the United States swallowed it up. Coal, steel, and mining industries grew around the railways. Towns appeared where railroads met resources. Immigrants, Chinese workers, Eastern Europeans, and others labored in brutal conditions, laying the tracks of Canada's industrial rise. The railway symbolized Canada's shift from colonial outpost to nation-building economy. In the early 20th century, Canada's golden resource wasn't metal or fur, it was wheat. Vast prairie fields turned Canada into the breadbasket of the world. Immigrants from Ukraine, Scandinavia, and beyond plowed endless acres of land, transforming the prairies into one of the largest grain producers on Earth. Grain elevators rose against the horizon, symbols of abundance. But again, the boom came with vulnerability. Global prices dictated prosperity. When the Great Depression hit, wheat farmers faced devastation. Canada learned a painful lesson. That dependence on one resource could bring both riches and ruin. In 1947, a well struck oil in Leduc, Alberta. Overnight, Canada's economy shifted again. Oil money flowed into pipelines, cities, and politics. Alberta became the new frontier, not of fur or wheat, but of petroleum. For decades, oil defined Canada's prosperity and also its controversies. It powered growth, but also fueled debates about Indigenous land rights, about climate change, about Canada's role in a world moving toward renewable energy. The oil age gave Canada wealth, but also tied it to one of the most divisive industries of the modern era. As oil boomed in the West, Ontario became the factory of Canada. The 1965 Auto Pact with the United States turned Windsor, Oshawa, and Hamilton into industrial powerhouses. Cars, steel, and machinery poured out of Canada's plants, feeding a middle-class dream. For the first time, Canada wasn't just exporting raw resources, it was manufacturing. The economy diversified, workers joined unions, and suburbs sprawled. But globalization would later test this stability, as factories closed and jobs moved overseas. The late 20th century brought a new gamble: free trade. Agreements like NAFTA tied Canada's fate to the US more tightly than ever. Trade barriers fell, markets opened, and Canadian products reached farther than ever before. But this also meant vulnerability. A recession in the US often meant a recession in Canada. Globalization brought cheap goods, but also economic uncertainty. Canada stood at a crossroads: remain a resource economy or leap into the future. At the dawn of the 21st century, a new story emerged. From Vancouver to Toronto, Waterloo to Montreal, tech hubs began to flourish. What began with small clusters of software companies grew into a national ecosystem. Toronto became a global center for AI research. Waterloo, home to BlackBerry, pioneered mobile technology. Montreal turned into a hub for video game design. Canada's highly educated workforce, multicultural cities, and government support for innovation fueled the shift. For the first time, Canada wasn't just selling raw resources, it was selling ideas. Canada today straddles two worlds. The old economy of oil, mining, and agriculture still powers exports. But the new economy of innovation, AI, biotech, green energy, drives its global reputation. The tension is constant. Pipelines versus climate policy, resource wealth versus digital innovation. This balance defines Canada's identity, a land of forests and farmlands, but also of research labs and startups. A country where tradition meets transformation. Canada's economic journey shows one thing: reinvention is survival. From furs to timber, from wheat to oil, from factories to tech hubs, Canada has always adapted to global tides. The question now is, what's next? Will it be clean energy, artificial intelligence, space technology? Canada stands at the edge of another transformation, and history suggests it won't be the last. Canada's economy is not a straight line. It's a river with bends and turns. Every era left its mark: beaver pelts, wheat fields, oil rigs, and now data servers. Together, they tell the story of a country that has constantly redefined itself. From fur trade to tech hubs, Canada's economy is not just about money, it's about resilience. A nation that learned to adapt, to rebuild, and to reinvent itself in the face of every challenge. That is the Canadian story.